Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to another session of, another development session. Um, Today I'm gonna start working something new or start showing something new. It's a new project, and I just want to give a introduction. I was gonna say brief introduction, but it's probably not gonna be brief. But I want to give an introduction about all of this, um, what the project's about, what my approach is gonna be, and how it already came to be like this. So first of all, the project is called Notula or Notula. Um, and the idea is that it is like a structured note-taking application for meetings and stuff. So instead of just having a blank page where you just write stuff down and in the end, like the notes are forgotten, and nothing happens with it, the idea is that it's more of a structured meeting tool where you can set up your agenda like with topics, each topic with its own section with the things you say. Then you can have a summary or something, action points. You can assign those action points to people. And so it's a bit more organized. Also, like you have a time boxing setting where you say, okay, this topic, so many minutes, this topic, so many minutes, and you have a timer. Those are a bit of the features I want to include because I know from experience that things can be very chaotic, and then you write stuff down, nothing happens with it, especially improvement points like action points, nothing happens with that. So that's a bit the idea of the application. So far, what has happened already? Well, first of all, um, with I started with or the application started out as a Micronaut application. Why? Because I do like Micronaut, or at least the idea that Micronaut has about like getting rid of reflection. And so I tried it a couple of times already on project to start it up, to set it up, and to use it for the code. But it never really worked out. Same with this one. I tried it, didn't work out. I think in this case I tried actually Maven with Micronaut, where in the past I always used Gradle with Micronaut, and Gradle I've never used Gradle before, so that was a bit annoying as well. Um, so it didn't work out. Anyway, but so you have so that's why and then I converted this to a typical Spring Boot application, which is what it is now, together with Maven, well, the Maven wrapper that is. And so what do we have? I have not much yet. This is actually not really to be used yet. But so the idea is also that I'm going to use or put more focus on business domain objects. As yeah, if people in here are aware of my blog, they might have read it. The last few blog posts basically explain the type of approach I want to try out now, and that is focusing more on the actual core domain of the application and putting that centrally. That's why I have business domain objects, and then those will hold the logic. Well, currently they don't hold much logic because there's nothing in there. And then you have just an object to store in the database, an object to give it back to the front end, and that's it. So the requests and data flows from the controller to the service, and then the service will actually hold all logic. In this case, creating a user doesn't really do much. Well, technically it should still do, well, actually it can do much. Yeah, that's maybe already a first topic. And then from the user service, it actually goes through the storage service. And the storage service is a layer in between that I've introduced between my actual repository and my service, because my service itself should only act upon business domain objects. It should not act on database access objects, not on data transfer objects. Nope, 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 nope. Only on BDOs. So the user storage service actually is the layer in between that actually gets the data from the database, converts it, does the update on it, and then whoop, converts it, and then returns back the business domain object. And so that is a bit the whole idea of the application. So that's basically the idea. What else is there to note is that I am a big fan of a couple of things. First of all, I'm a big fan of test-driven development, which in the setup here I haven't really done well because I first want to see, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? Like, what's a bit the main approach? But so from now on, I probably will start doing test-driven development a lot more again. Why? Because I just like it. A second thing as well is I'm a big fan of unit testing. So you will see that all of my classes, they all have their own tests. I also typically structure my tests a bit differently from other typical people. So you will see that if I open my service next door, so my service test has a nested class that corresponds to a method. And then for that method, I will have all my tests. Why is that? Because I've noticed that there are actually, like for every method, you have a couple of tests. And it was just very confusing. I would say like create user success, create user login, no, create user. Like you had all these tests with the same, that start with the same name because it has to indicate the method. And then it just, yeah, it's a bit weird. Then I was like, okay, so why not actually go for the nested one structure? That's actually very easy. All of your tests for this method are in one place. Another approach, of course, could have been to like put the class on the upper level, user service test, create user something. But I feel that's a bit too much, also because it actually problems have been detected. Wait, how come? My Sonar Cube might not be configured on this one. Nope, Sonar Cube is on. No Sonar Cube issues to display. Anyway, so yes, and you might also see if I'm writing code that sometimes you'll see this thingy pop up. This should be disabled because I am planning on actually trying to use GitHub Copilot on this project. So yeah, because in the past I did use, well, Codemium, or now known as Windsurf. So yeah, but that's it. But so, I noticed that there is something missing here, not just login no, but I also should actually add a test for duplicate email. Or email already exists, duplicate email. Email already used. And at the moment, there is no way to test this. I don't even know what kind of exception I want to throw, but something should happen. Exception host cannot start. Okay. I was also updating stuff, so maybe that's why things are a bit weird. Let's hope things are a bit better now. Okay. And this is another important part as well, as you will see in my test. I am a big fan of test objects. And of course, I will have to see whether that is still usable with my new setup. And because things have changed, instance of duplicate, not duplicates. This I still have to determine. My setup seems a bit messed up because I don't get compiler errors. What the hell is going on here? But so in the idea and what I had in the past was that I would put a lot of, yeah, not like here. That's why I say I don't have to check whether I want to use it or not. I put a lot of like assertions, and it will always be the same. Like, oh yeah, you assert that all of these fields are exactly the same. I was like, yeah, okay, but I'm doing this over and over and over and over again. It doesn't make much sense. Also, getting like same test data, you're like, you have to create a new email address, new password, and whatever. And that's like here in the user service. Then you have to do it in the repository as well. Well, actually, it was in your database script. And then here you have to verify that it's the username and password and whatever. And like, in your controller, you had the exact same thing. Remove this unused endpoint by That's a test. The test is okay. So like in my service repository, my controller, and all of them, I always use the exact same data, and it even becomes worse if you actually have something that's connected to your user. So there you will also again like I have a test, I have to return a user. Okay, so I will use this user object that I've created, and you would scatter all of your data around everywhere. And then what happens? You say like, oh yeah, actually my user info, for instance, now it's only an ID and an email. Like, ah yeah, yes, and so now it will have a private string first name, and it will have a private string last name, not required and whatever. But yeah, if you want to have this information now, then or you want to make sure that that's also in your controller, then you have to add that information there. You have to make sure you check that information there. You have to do this, you have to do that. You have to add it in so many places. And I was like, that doesn't make much sense, you know? I mean, like, how come? How come? And then I took a bit of an well, to solve those both issues actually, both like not duplicating or like not having to always find up or find new information, new thingy, and making it more easy or making it less easy to forget updating tests. I used the approach of test objects, and so the idea is that I've now used an enum, but I'm thinking it could also be a record class, it could be a regular class, it can be many things. Quick fix. No, quick fix. Firstly, there's no quick fix for this, which is weird because I would think that there actually would be a quick fix. Just delete it. Whatever. So the idea is that you have a couple of objects, users in this case, and they already have defined information. And then you can easily say, as you see in my test, you say, I want to have it, I need a user. Also, I will take, in this case, Eduardo Christensen, which is the first user here. I have a couple of other users as well. And so you can grow the amount of test objects you have based on the requirements you need. In this case, I've actually already, you can see in the resources, my database, I've created a couple of users, and they actually are for different companies as well. Yeah, I don't have companies yet, so, well, I will call them organizations, not companies. But anyway, but you have all the information here. It's a bit redundant indeed that I have it in my script and here, but typically what I do is I keep this in sync with my actual objects. Yeah, and then the nice thing is that if I now say like, okay, I want for my Eduardo Christensen, I need to create a login, be it a login request, be it like that he requests like a sign up or whatever, whenever I need the object, I can just say like, oh, well, here I have a method to create a login object for this user. So in my test, I say user.login and I say user.info, and that's convenient. The user.info is technically not required because here I could return a mock object and then I can just say like, well, this should be the exact object as a mock object. But there will be other places where you don't want to use a mock object. So, and if you can, why not just use the actual object? For instance, in my controller test, which I have not written yet, if I say here, where's my controller? Create. So you have add nested class create void success. Oh, and then I have to think again how I have to do this. It is mock mvc dot. It's annoying that I don't have autocomplete. Where's my autocomplete? Something is messing up my autocomplete. Why does this always happen when I'm streaming? Okay, anyway, so in here you would at some point you say user repository. There's no way this needs a user repository. It needs a user service because your controller should never, or my controller, at least in my case, should never have access to it. So then, for instance, here you would say, what the hell, learn how to type. Maybe that's also why my autocomplete was not working. Nope, okay. Otherwise, my compiler would also have mentioned errors, because I do have everything set up, right? I have a Java, oh, OpenJDK 22. Oh, that's not gonna work, because my project is 24. Okay, so I will have to update my JDK, which I think I have available. It's peculiar. I only have a 22 here. Okay. I will fix that off camera and I will do that. Maybe that's why this is not working right now. Although I must say that I have had issues with OpenJDK 24 or with Java 24 and then Mockito and stuff. So maybe that's why I went back to 22 on here, but I have to see whether that's still the case or not. I did notice that 24 actually also had an issue with VS Code, so I hope it's updated now, it's fixed, that if I do coverage on my tests, yeah, it can't find anything. It doesn't even show test or anything here. Where is my test? Okay, so normally if you have a test thingy here, and if I would run my test with coverage, it wouldn't register any of the coverage, and that's because the Jacoco agent it uses version than what it should be, and that one can't work yet with Java 24. Anyway, as I was saying, so in this case, if you would say a common user service dot create, and then here you give your object, and we say then return. Yeah, you want to here, of course, create your I'm going to make sure I'm going to use the same user just for the sake of it. No real reason. There's no reason it has to be the same user, but when it's here, you can say like, ah, yeah, then I will give back user dot info. And then this is the actual object, and then I know this user info that comes from create user. And the user service create user, it gives back this user, then I know it will be converted to my DTO, which then ends up in the response, which happens here. This I'm probably going to extract to my base controller. And then in here I can say, what was it again, dot and expect JSON path, and then you can do actual checks on the JSON path. .id. So something like that you would end up with. And of course, in this case, you don't want to create a mock, you want to have a real object. And then you say, okay, this is the real user. Here as well, create user. Yeah, requests. This is a very fun or interesting thing as well, because here you create an actual request. So I need the user, create user DTO. And that is also a thing that I'm wondering now is, yeah, now everything is even more broken. I can't even click on this. Yeah, okay, compiler issues. So these are BDOs. This makes sense that these are here, I feel, because they will probably be used in quite a lot of cases. You need it in your controller, you need it in your service, you need it in your storage service tests. In all those cases, you need it. Then the question is, what about DTOs and DAOs? Do you want to have those in here as well? Do you want to easily create them? Well, first of all, my DAO is not easy to create because the IDs are blocked. If you go take a look at my user DAO, which it's annoying, I can't click on it. But user DAO, yeah, I have an idea here, but it's generated by my database, and my setter is private. I don't even have a constructor that I can use to bypass it, that I can say like, oh yeah, but I will create an object with this ID, because I don't want my application to create an object with a certain idea. So, and then I'm like, if I don't want my application to do it, then I will make sure my application can't do it. So I can't do it. That's also why the no-args constructor is private. Why? Because it's meant for Hibernate, for nobody else. If I want to create an object, I will do it through the actual constructor, which forces me to fill in certain information, so I don't forget it. There are no actual validations in the information because it's DAO. My actual validation would happen on this level. The login is the one where I've already done a couple of things. Info is not. And that's also because this is more of a return object, but I guess I should in here also validate certain things. I guess in this case, user info. No, user info. In this case, user info might actually be never the long. Actually, could be an like this. because user info will always be about a certain user. You will never say like, oh yeah, this is user info for a user, but I don't know for which user, which is different from the login. The login, if that would have an ID, which of course it doesn't, then yeah, then it could be 0. That's also why the DAO is actually a long with a capital L, because yeah, if you want to create a new user, the user won't have an ID yet because it will be created by the system or the database. So in that sense, the user info actually is a bit of a, or the user is a bit of a special case, because for instance, if you want to create any other object, my organization, for instance, which is not done yet, but here, for instance, yeah, if I say create a new organization, then I will say create a new organization with this name. And that will be the organization object, but it won't have an idea yet. And that's how you know it's a new organization. The user is different. The user is split it up, where I have user login because here I give the password. But as soon as user info, I never, ever, ever, ever want to look at the password again. I don't care about the password. If I get my user info, that's too much. So that's why I split this up here. Is that a good approach? I don't know. We'll have to see about that. Here as well, email now is a string, but technically, because you can see here as well, that yeah, there are certain requirements on the email that I want to make a separate object out of this. And that is something that is, well, commonly done, that is done. And people have called it, it's primitive obsession, where people say like, ah, yeah, email is a string. Like, no, why is email a string? Why is email not? Why can't you, for instance, write private email? Of course, this will not work now. But why don't you create an object or a class for email? And then all of these checks saying like, oh, well, email should be not null, email should not be blank, email should match a certain pattern, because it has to adhere to certain requirements. So why don't you put it in a different object? And I've experienced with that, and I do like it, and I'm definitely going to do it. Why? Because one of the advantages also is like you can uniform things. If you then ever want to, if you want to create an email out of an object, you can make sure it's always lowercase, or for instance, if you, maybe not lowercase, but if you do get value on it, or if you have a compare on it, the equals and hash code, for instance, you can say like, well, that's going to be case insensitive. You can do all of those kind of things with it, with special objects, and that's the power of it. Same for password. Why would you just create string password? Why is there no concept of a password? This is a bit more difficult because you have hashed and unhashed passwords, and definitely a password will not be able to hash itself, for the simple reason that you would need the actual password hasher, which I think, why have I called it here storage gateway? Ah, that was the old name. Yes, okay, that was my experiment. I think I've called it there storage gateway. Now I'm going to call it organization storage service and not gateway, I think. Or am I going to call it storage gateway? Maybe I should call it storage gateway instead of storage service, because it's a bit annoying enough. You use it and you're storage and service, you don't see the difference. I am going to change this to gateway. Gateway is better. Gateway, capital W? Nope, small W, of course. Gateway. So that's how this concept is going to be called from now on. A gateway is the user storage gateway. Potentially be storage gateway. Yes, user storage gateway. Ah, yes, because one of the things was also that maybe at some point, now I do my mapping and everything in my controller. At some point, maybe I'll feel like, well, I don't want to put all that mapping logic in my controller directly. I want to have another layer in between my service and my controller. And then that can be my user gateway. This is the user storage gateway. That's the gateway to the storage. And this is the gateway through the, or user controller gateway, whatever. But then this should be user repository gateway, no? User controller gateway, user repository, no, it's storage. Because it's more independent. Yeah, maybe I'm not gonna just, maybe I'm gonna rename this as well. Instead of just saying it's a storage gateway, it's a repository gateway. But repository is very long. I don't want to name it too long either. Gateway is the same length as storage. No service. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, that doesn't matter. Okay, so user storage service. Anyway, so naming is always tricky. But that's not the point here. My point is that so my user storage service or storage gateway, that one is actually now responsible for encoding. And that's actually a very, very interesting idea as well. Typically, you would put this in your service. Like, oh yeah, you get a user request, the user wants to create an account. You know what? We'll check whether the user exists, which I haven't done yet. I'll take the login, I will take the password, I will hash it, and then I will put that on my DAO. And then I will save it. But if you think about it, the actual idea of hashing a password, that's not business logic. My application doesn't care how passwords are stored, how passwords are encoded and hashed and whatever. I mean, like, that's a security principle for sure, but it's a database security principle. If you could do without passwords, then you wouldn't even care about it at all. I mean, like, my user service doesn't care about passwords, which of course will be interesting as well as soon as you start logging in, because your service will not be responsible for checking the password even. The service will just be like, oh yeah, give me the user with this email address and this password. And then it will be the storage gateway that actually does the query, does the hashing, and says like, oh, whoop, the person with this hash password, and it's like, oh, nope, doesn't exist. So it's an interesting concept, and it opens up a more fine-grained discussion about where logic belongs. Does it belong in the service? Does it belong in a gateway? Does it actually belong in the object itself or not? So those are all interesting concepts which I am willing and going to explore. But I think I'm gonna leave it like it is for now on this in this short session. Why? Because this accessibility update should be removed, but I need it. I understand some people don't like it, but I need it for my test. Well, the question is, do I need it for my test? Well, yes, because I need the object with, and that's another thing. In the past, okay, so one last thing. In the past, I wouldn't create an actual user DAO. I would create a mock for this. I would do like mock. Actually, I'm gonna do the other way around. Say here, this is user DAO. So I would do something like this, and then I would say when DAO dot get ID, then return ID. Because this actually also is wrong. This should be ID. I don't know why I hard-coded one in there. That's wrong. But so this is a different approach. And in this case, yes, okay, you don't need any mocking. In this case, you don't need any reflection. So both are advantages. The downside is that in this case, you can't verify the object anymore because your mock will not have logic for actual setters. So maybe it would be better after looking into mocking. Mockito has the whole concept of Mockito. It's called more like a spy, I think. Is the spy? The problem is then it's not mocked, is it? I think I might try to use a spy instead, and the spy then will have the actual, like I will be able to set everything, or I will try to bypass the, but you don't want that either, do you? I mean, like if you do changes on the objects and then you have hard coded that the get always should always return this. Because then if you do something with a DAO and you say, oh, DAO.set email or whatever, and then imagine this is actual test code, and not in my thingy here. Yeah, and if you then want to say, oh yeah, I now want to assert that he actually did it, so I do an assert equals, or assert that dao.get email is equal to, yeah, this will not work because my get has been hard coded here. So this logic will fail because even though you do a set email here you say like, I'll get email, oh yeah, but I will return this email. Like, oh, that's not the one I set here. Like, how come? How come? Well, because you're actually working on like a fake object and on a real object. And that's the problem with this kind of approach, is that you don't see that you're working on a real object or not. Here, you literally are working on a real object. Yes, you've bypassed certain things to be able to work with reflection. Or if you have to use reflection to bypass certain things, which is nasty. I definitely don't like it. It's test code, so maybe it's okay. One last thing about the test objects as well is that they also allow you to more easily and check and verify objects and assumptions and whatever. In that sense, that, as I mentioned before, like, okay, if I do first name, last name, and I create on the user, like, okay, I probably want to make sure that everywhere in my code where I do create objects and I do certain things with it, my username is also set. And that's what you can do here. Instead of having the checks on every single part or on every single, like in every test, I just do it here and I say like, okay, assert equals on my test user. Probably, I'm not sure if assert equals is the best approach because it's more like JUnit speak. If, and that's another if, of course, and that's maybe another question I should ask myself, is if I would actually have this object and I would do a equals on it, then I could change that logic as well. The problem is going to be with my password and email, and that's probably not what I want. Especially if my email has an equals that is case insensitive, for instance, yeah, then an equals on user login will not check the actual email, and then your test doesn't check exactly what it should be. So, yeah, I prefer more in my tests a more the lower level thing. For instance, in here, get email is equal to email. I probably don't want to do that. I probably want to say dot get value if I have it, because in here, also in here, I wouldn't do the actual objects. This would literally be, will stay a string no matter what. So it's that simple. And so that's a bit an introduction. Unfortunately, I can't do much more, and that will be for tomorrow because my setup is messed up and I have to investigate why. Yes. All the thingy. Okay, and that's about it. It's also interesting how SonarCube is no longer complaining about the code it was complaining about before. Maybe it hasn't, that's because there is probably this code. Yes, there is. Yeah. So SonarCube is a bit annoying. That's also like, yeah, do we actually need this if you see where is it used? Find all occurrences? No. Yeah, my thing. If you see where this is used, this will not be used in many locations. The only location where this actually can be used is in my user storage gateway, because that's the only one that actually manages DAOs. Of course, also in my repository test, because that will give. So you have your repository test and you have your storage service. That's the only two places where they actually act upon DAOs. And then if you look my repository test, so here I create the object myself because this is creating. Of course, in creating, I can create myself because I don't have an ID yet. And here I went email password myself. Why? Because yeah, if I use a real test user, that's not going to work. Unless, of course, which of course is also an option, if you create a test user that doesn't exist yet. and then here you would have an ID of null, so then I would have to convert this to a long. But then, you can indeed say like, oh yeah, this is a user who has not signed up yet, and if I want to sign up, that's how it goes. The only problem, of course, is that that doesn't make much sense, because the only thing that makes sense, well, of course, I only have email and password right now. The only thing that wouldn't make sense for a new user is email and password. If I first name, last name, whatever, and my login or my account creation only requires an email and a password, then all the information of the new user, it would be there, but it wouldn't be really useful now, would it? So that's why I only went with valid test users for now, and I will see, maybe I edit later. So here I have an object, create one, and as you can see, there actually is no reference to any test user here yet, because I haven't done, oh, there actually is here. In case the email is duplicates, so like, okay, I want a duplicate email. I know this user will exist, so just give me this user's email. So yeah, but then of course, when as soon as I say, okay, find by email or find user, yeah, then I will want to use an actual test user, and I'll say like, oh, well, actually, I want to find this user, and I want to make sure that I actually get this user. So yeah, that's an important or it's an interesting concept. So where else is it used? Well, in the storage service, of course, test. Here I will have DAOs as well. Here I haven't done it very nicely. So what the hell are you talking about? I do tap indentation. What the hell? Uh, what? SonarQube, what are you talking? It's going to match the regular expression. What? It's not a constant. It's what? Well, I mean, technically, yes, it is a constant because it never gets changed and it's a final. But what? SonarQube, what the hell are you talking about? What? SonarQube? My SonarQube is a bit weird. I should remove some of these checks. Anyway, so in here, you probably will see that, yeah, create user, it will go to the repository, save, and then I will say, then return created. And this created is a DAO. In this case, I even went for a mocked DAO. Why is that? Because honestly, I don't care. Because the whole logic here, if you look at it, what does the user storage service actually do? I have it open here. Like, what do you care in this? What kind of logic do you care about in this class? The only thing you care about is that the password has been encoded, that then your repository.save action has been called with the DAO that, well, has been created here. So that's why you have the arg that, or arg that, because you want to verify that the email and the password exactly are what it should be. There is no other way to bypass this, because this is a new inline in this method. You can't, well, with Mockito you can do a mocked construction, whatever, but I don't like that. I don't prefer to do that. And in this case, an arg that is just as good and even better. In my opinion, it's more clearer. So here I say like, okay, the email address is equal to the login email, which I've created here. And well, the password is the hash password, and the hash password is indeed what you retrieve by doing the password encoder.encode on the login get password. And the login is what is passed to the service. So I mean, that's what you care about. And then, okay, you say save created, but the created, honestly, you don't care what happens here with the created anymore. You say, okay, I get back my created object. I don't care which object it is. I don't care what it contains. I mean, it's the user repository that's responsible for giving me a proper object. And then the conversion to BDO, honestly, I don't care about that. That is the DAO that's responsible for it. That's why I also have a DAO test that tests, says like, okay, will it properly convert it? And here again, you will see like, okay, here, because it's a DAO test, you will see DAO stuff happening. And so here might be another case where you say like, well, in this case, actually, it would make sense, or it would have would been fun to have the whole logic of say like, okay, give me the DAO of this object. Could be, because then all of this in here, I don't need to do the reflection again. But so I'm not certain yet. So I think at the moment I actually don't use any of my test user DAO logic anywhere because I fix it differently. And that's why I was actually able with this test to say like, well, since I don't really care about the actual objects, what I do is like I just create the mock object, which I I prefer. Okay, I'm getting a bit too interested in var objects. Here as well, this should not be var, this should be a user login because it's not clear what the type is. Anyway, but so here, basically I just say like, I will make sure that my repository gives me a DAO. I don't care which one it is. And then I will say like, oh, well, the DAO will create me the appropriate BDO because that's the DAO's purpose. That's what logic is enforced there and has its own tests and whatever. And then all I care about is that what I get back is this object. I don't care what's in it. I don't care how it was created. Well, I do kind of care how it was created because that's we create like this. But I'm like, honestly, I mean, like, I don't care about the actual DAO and the BDO, DAO, BDO in here because I don't do anything with it. Of course, there will be other cases where you say like, okay, I want to update an object. Well, then you probably want that, and then that's where the whole question, the whole thing comes in. How are you going to enforce things? If I, for instance, say update user, then I would be final user info. Well, so here you would get a you would get it from the database, and then here you would say DAO dot set email. Well, probably not email. I'm not sure. Well, can you change email? Should you be able to change your email? Maybe. That's another question. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't, because the email is also your login. I should be allowed to do that. Then you have to check again whether the email is already not taken. We'll have to see about that. But so then here you have user repository dot save. Then you say DL, and then you would here have final user DAO updated. So the last part is exactly the same. You're like, I don't care about the updated. I don't care about the conversion to the BDO. What you do care is this part here, the DAO, this DAO, which you also get from find by ID probably, something like this. So this is important. Are you gonna, in your test, are you gonna make this a mocked object or a real object? If you create this well, in either case, well, it does change the way you test it, of course. If this is a mocked object, then here you want to verify that your mocked object has been called with a set email. But then you also want to verify that that was done before you call the save here with this object. Because otherwise, if I by accident do this, and I just verify that my user repository has been called .save on the mocked object, and I verify that the set email has been called on my mocked object, then this test will still pass if it hasn't actually verified any order. So if it's a real object, then I don't care about my set email and whatever. I give the real object here, but then I do on .save, I do something like this. Okay, well, I save that the arg dot, oh yeah, the email has been changed, the password has been changed, and then that's how you would enforce it. Then this would become a verify, of course, but that's how you would enforce it, and that's more natural to me than like an in order. So that's why the real objects are nice. And then, of course, you would still have an updated and the BDO version of it, which you don't care about, which can be mocks, because that's this part. Don't care. But the most important part, actually finding it and then updating it and saving it, that is the critical part. And that's what you really want to test. That's the real logic in the storage gateway. So doing that on a mocked object, that I find is a bit tricky. So maybe that's why. So maybe I do. Maybe I will end up with the test user and actually using this DAO anyway. Um, the annoying thing is that my Sonar Cube is complaining about this, but it should not complain about this in test code. I have to see whether I can turn that off, or tweak it so it doesn't check for test code. Maybe it doesn't realize it's test code because the compiler is not set up correctly. Maybe that's because my POM. Maybe I should just. Yes, okay. I think I will investigate this and I'll make sure that by tomorrow everything is fine, nice, and working. And then tomorrow we can actually start coding. I hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye.